Have you ever found yourself saying yes when you really wanted to say no, or stayed silent when something felt profoundly wrong, just to avoid conflict? If you have, you're not alone. The fear of confrontation is something almost everyone experiences at some point, and it can quietly erode who we are. It feels safe to avoid fights, to keep the peace, to let others take the lead. But in reality, that avoidance comes at a cost. You aren't just avoiding a fight. You're giving away your power, accepting injustices, and slowly, imperceptibly, letting pieces of your true self slip away. Friedrich Nietzsche explored this deeply. He saw that people who consistently avoid confrontation don't just protect themselves, they also develop what he called slave morality. In On the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche explains that when individuals repress their strength, deny their instincts, and refuse to assert themselves, they adopt a moral code that praises meekness and condemns assertiveness. They celebrate submission as virtue. But Nietzsche argues that this is a trap, a subtle prison where resentment builds and personal power erodes. This is the concept of ressentiment, a simmering frustration born from unexpressed strength, unclaimed rights, and denied potential. Consider the story of Rosa Parks. You may know it as a story of civil rights heroism, but it's also a perfect illustration of confronting injustice instead of yielding to fear. On that day in 1955, Parks made a conscious choice not to give up her seat. She could have avoided confrontation. She could have quietly obeyed the law and kept the peace, but instead, she faced injustice directly. By doing so, she reclaimed her dignity, inspired a movement, and transformed the world around her. Avoiding that confrontation would have preserved a temporary comfort, but at the cost of her agency, her identity, and her moral power. Nietzsche would say that confronting the uncomfortable, standing against injustice, and asserting yourself even when it's risky is essential for expressing your will to power. This doesn't mean dominating others or being aggressive. It means claiming your life, your voice, and your choices. The will to power is your capacity to create, to act, and to shape your own destiny. When fear keeps you silent, it suppresses that power and leaves you subject to the whims of others, to circumstance, and to the slow corrosion of self-respect. But why does confrontation feel so terrifying? The answer is partly psychological. Humans are wired to avoid conflict. It triggers our fight-or-flight response. We imagine worst-case scenarios, replay humiliating outcomes, and anticipate rejection or retaliation. On top of that, social conditioning often teaches that confrontation is impolite, unkind, or morally wrong. Nietzsche critiques this directly, arguing that many moral teachings are tools of the weak to control the strong. He calls it slave morality, valuing submission, meekness, and obedience as virtues, while condemning assertiveness and strength. When we internalize this, we fear asserting ourselves even when it's necessary. Avoiding conflict might feel like virtue or tact, but it's actually a form of self-erasure. Every injustice you tolerate, every moment you remain silent, chips away at the boundaries of who you are. You begin to believe that your needs, opinions, and feelings are less important than others. You adopt a false humility that hides fear rather than integrity. Over time, this avoidance creates ressentiment, a deep, unacknowledged anger at life, at others, and even at yourself. It's not productive anger. It's frozen, passive frustration that clouds judgment and stunts growth. Confrontation, on the other hand, can be transformative. Nietzsche explores this idea in Thus Spoke Zarathustra through the concept of the metamorphosis of the spirit. He describes a journey in which a person must face challenges, fears, and conflicts head-on to evolve into their full, authentic self. Avoiding confrontation is choosing stasis over transformation. It keeps you small, trapped in the cycle of passive resentment instead of moving toward your true potential. Confrontation is not violence. It's assertion. It's the acknowledgement that your life and values matter, and that standing up, even in small ways, protects your integrity. Let's bring this to a metaphor. Imagine a river blocked by a dam. The water behind it represents your true self, your needs, opinions, and potential. Every time you avoid confrontation, you add a brick to the dam. The river slows, stagnates, and eventually, the energy turns inward, eroding the riverbed and weakening the surrounding landscape. Over time, your identity, the banks that shape your life, begins to crumble. Confrontation is like opening the floodgates strategically. It's release, movement, and restoration. The water doesn't destroy the river, it restores its natural course. Now let's make this practical. How do you start confronting fears without becoming reckless or aggressive? Here are 3 actionable steps. First, acknowledge your fear. The very first act of confronting injustice is recognizing it. Label it, understand it, and admit it to yourself. Journaling can help. Write down situations where you felt powerless or silenced. Identify what you were avoiding and why. Awareness is the first step toward action. Second, start small. You don't need to challenge the entire system at once. Begin with minor confrontations. Speak up when someone interrupts you. Express your preference clearly in a group, or respectfully correct misinformation. Small acts build courage and establish a pattern of integrity. Every time you assert yourself, you reinforce your identity and reduce the grip of fear. Third, frame confrontation as self-affirmation, not conflict. This is key. The goal is not to dominate or hurt others. It's to maintain alignment with your values. Nietzsche emphasizes the will to power as creative, constructive, and self-affirming. Each time you confront injustice thoughtfully, you reclaim a piece of yourself that fear had suppressed. You strengthen your boundaries, your agency, and your capacity to act in the world. Consider another real-world example. Whistleblowers in corporate or government settings. Their decisions to confront wrongdoing, often at great personal risk, illustrate the cost of fear versus the power of integrity. Many lose jobs, relationships, or security, but they reclaim moral authority and self-respect. Those who remain silent avoid immediate conflict, but experience long-term erosion of identity, living with internalized ressentiment. Facing confrontation is a discipline, not a one-time act. It requires reflection, courage, and practice. You'll stumble, you'll feel anxious, but each step you take toward asserting your truth chips away at the prison of fear and strengthens your character. Nietzsche's metamorphosis of the spirit isn't metaphorical. It's a roadmap. To transform, to evolve, you must meet the challenges you avoid. In summary, the fear of confrontation is more than a social inconvenience. It's a force that shapes who you become. Avoiding conflict may feel safe, but it cultivates resentment, diminishes your power, and erodes your authenticity. Confrontation, done consciously and deliberately, is an act of courage and self-preservation. By understanding Nietzsche's concepts of slave morality, ressentiment, will to power, and the metamorphosis of the spirit, you can see that the path to true freedom is through engagement, not avoidance. The fear of confrontation is a silent thief, stealing your dignity, power, and true self. Nietzsche reminds us that avoiding conflict is not virtue. It is a prison, a cycle of resentment and suppressed potential. Every time you face what you fear, you reclaim a piece of yourself, asserting your will to power and moving closer to authenticity. Confrontation is not aggression. It is alignment with your values, a declaration that your life and voice matter. Break the cycle, face injustice boldly, and transform fear into freedom. The first step toward becoming who you truly are starts now.